Hi, I'm Jackie Allison. I'm an executive with the Management and Economic Society of CIM. That's the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum. And I'd like to welcome you today to a mentor interview. Today's guest is Catherine Gignac, and I'd like to introduce her now. She's the chair of the board of Cameco Corporation. So welcome, Catherine. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jackie. Very nice to see you and to be here.
Great. So I'm really excited to learn a bit more about you and for the audience to be able to hear about your background and your path through the mining industry. So I think we'll jump right in. And what I would ask you to do is tell us a bit about your background in terms of your education, if we could start with that.
Sure, by all means. I always had an interest in the sciences and maths, and at my high school, we had no exposure to geology or engineering programs per se. But when I got into first year university and then second year, I decided that geology was all encompassing in terms of many of the sciences and the maths. And so it was in my second year that I decided to enroll in geology, and I loved it. It answered a lot of questions. I was very curious, and it put together a lot of the gaps that I had in our world, how things work, and also in terms of potential career opportunities. So I loved it. So I graduated with a BSc in geology, and from there went searching for a full-time position. And I was very fortunate to come across Camflo Mines. Camflo was a junior mining company, had been around for quite some time, but still quite junior. They had about a dozen mining executives in the head office, all male, and their secretaries and their assistants. And I was very fortunate. I interviewed with the VP Exploration, and at that time he was looking for to build out the entire exploration team for a new project, the McDermott project. And I wasn't quite sure I actually wanted to be an assistant working with him, but the opportunity came. I liked the company, and so I took on the role. And I basically was his right-hand person, and handled option agreements, land claims. I implemented a computerized database for the properties and the land claims and the assessment work. We worked on prospects, property submissions for potential M&A work. I also implemented one of the very first computerized drill core logging systems, which was a lot of fun and made light of the work in the field. And liaising with the exploration team in the field around the McDermott project was a lot of fun, back and forth on a regular basis, and quite enjoyed it.
That sounds like a fantastic first job, and what an introduction to the industry. So what did you do after that? What was your next step from there?
Well, this was the main project we worked on. Times were lean, and the McDermott project was developed into the Holt McDermott mine, and we were offered positions to go down to the exploration department in Nevada to work on what was then the Goldstrike mine. And at the time, I decided, no, it may be time to start a family and to do some other things. So I stayed back, and I had been taking some accounting courses, some finance investment courses, because I was starting to get more interested in the stock market side of the mining industry, as opposed to mining itself. So I basically wrote letters to names of people that I saw in the Globe and Mail and the Financial Post, and said, hey, I kind of like what you're doing. Do you need any help? And I sent out a number of letters. I got a couple of offers, and I started at Merrill Lynch soon after that.
Wow, that's great. And so what advice would you have for someone who's thinking of going down that path, starting with a technical background and maybe looking at getting into the more financial side of the business?
It is interesting. As a geologist, you often don't have exposure to the stock market. Whereas when you're in the stock market and in capital markets and investment, you are very focused on what the geologists and the engineers are doing. So it's a little bit of a mix. So if you have a technical background and are looking at making a slight change, I would suggest do your homework, take some accounting courses, learn about the stock market, learn about how to invest, learn about how the capital markets work. And that should help you to gather whether or not you have an interest or a passion in that area.
Yeah, I guess there's courses out there or programs like the Canadian Securities course. That was one that I started off with in terms of something to get a bit more of a comprehensive look at what was out there. It doesn't go into as much depth as some other programs, but certainly it was a good introduction for someone perhaps who hasn't ever had that exposure, as you mentioned. So, okay, so you ended up then working in financial markets. What was your path from that starting point?
It was a great training ground with firms like Merrill Lynch. I ended up over the course of almost 25 years working for 10 different brokerage firms. Now some of those were takeovers. We're quite familiar with takeovers. And McNeil Mantha was purchased by RBC Dominion. Deacon Capital was bought by Dundee, etc. But it was an opportunity to work and receive good training and good global exposure with a large Canadian bank-owned broker. But I also found that it was quite exciting to be direct drive and work for independent boutiques. And I always had a lot of fun doing that as well. And also got a chance to branch out as opposed to just precious metals. I wrote the chapter on diamonds for the Handbook of Canadian Security Analysis. So that diamond research was an opportunity which was interesting. I had a passion for it, and I was able to parlay that into something quite worthwhile.
So that's certainly quite a few firms that you worked for. What would you say to someone who's thinking of going that route, but doesn't really know what the day-to-day looks like for someone who works at a brokerage firm? What sort of tasks would you do in the mix for, say, over a week? Maybe not the same thing every day, but what sorts of things would you spend most of your time doing?
That's a very good question. There was a book, I think it was Joe Can wrote it, Kan, Best Jobs on Bay Street, and this is quite a few years ago. But he kind of outlined what the roles of each position were. But bottom line is a lot of research, a lot of sitting in front of a computer, a lot of reading, going through the annual reports, the financial statements, the proxy circulars, all of the public disclosure documents that the companies release. And then, of course, getting a feel for what exactly they have in terms of assets would require site visits as well to get an opportunity to kick the tires and actually see that they have X number of trucks or dozers or front-end loaders on the site, as opposed to just reading about it. So do a little bit of your due diligence and checks and balances as well.
Right. So there is a difference between what you read sometimes and what you see on site. And you can learn a lot from these site visits. You get to see the projects firsthand. You get a sense of the excitement on site or some of the potential that maybe doesn't fully come through in some of the documentation. And of course, you're interacting not just with the staff, but maybe some government officials, sometimes with people in the community. You get a really fuller sense of what that company is doing. So that's great. Gives people a good sense. I guess you spend a fair bit of time modeling companies then to try and understand what value they had, what was their potential as well. So it's understanding the commodity markets, as you mentioned. Diamonds was in the mix, golds, base metals. It's quite a range, but very exciting work. So that's great. And how did you manage then? Because you had said you were interested in family at that time when you made the change. How did you manage to weave that into the commitments you had for work?
Mm-hmm. It definitely helped to have a supportive partner. There's no question. Starting a family would be very difficult to do it on your own, especially working long hours. You asked the question in terms of what does a day look like on Bay Street. Very, very long hours. You start early, even before your morning meeting begins, well before the trading day starts, and you finish up quite late into the evening. Publicly traded companies often like to put their press releases out after market close and sometimes later in the evening or very, very early in the morning. And so it's almost a 24/7 job. You're always trying to stay in touch, and it's difficult to do that if you don't have a supportive partner that can help lessen the load.
Yes.
Yeah, but one of the biggest challenges, of course, was that work-life balance, to try and figure out how to succeed in both areas and do them at the same time. And I think the biggest learning that I had was to make concessions. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It can, as long as the family's happy and as long as your work gets done, then there may be ways around it, and so you just have to find that in your own situation.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and that's a major learning that there will be compromise along the way. But it is possible to do both with a proper supportive network around you, and having that supportive partner, having people who can help out at a pinch, people who I guess a lot of women do end up using daycare, or they have family members, to come in and help, or friends, or some arrangement that allows you to do both, be a full-time worker and doing extra long hours, as sometimes, as you mentioned, it does happen in the brokerage world, and in fact, most of the time, as well as bringing up a family. So congrats for that, Catherine. I think truth is, it is a lot of work, and it is very demanding, and it can be stressful, but these things can be managed, and you do have to learn to to get that balance. You have to seek it, and you have to really find out how to make it work on both sides. And it is possible for those who are worried about it, and some women are worried about how they might manage that. Maybe it's a bit different if they're working at site and they're not really at home and where their kids may be. Maybe they're doing the traveling back and forth. So there could be other challenges, but certainly the brokerage world and working in finance tends to be in the cities, and so you do have that chance to be maybe at home where your family might also be. So it comes with pluses and minuses in terms of the time commitment, but at least it allows you to be physically where your family is. So great. Yeah. So you brought that up as one of the challenges. Any particular thing you'd like to highlight along your career path that really struck you as important or significant, or made a major change for you along the way?
It was a very there were a lot of decisions to be made along the way. There's no question. This is my father's generation that would have been working 30, 40 years at the same company. I think the observation that we do change careers several times, or at least the job positions that we have, and that we do change companies. And those decisions don't come easy or lightly. You mentioned the word networking. Networking also includes work colleagues as well. And so if you've built up a very good rapport with work colleagues, but perhaps the position isn't working out for you, that's a difficult decision to make, to move on. So you really have to take all aspects into consideration. And that network, when you were talking, it just comes to mind. Even if you're working on a fly-in, fly-out situation, that you need to have that core network at home, that that you can continue to do your work at site, but when you come back, then you can step in and things are managed. So it's bigger than one person. It takes a village.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And so when we think about where you've come, Catherine, some would say it's the pinnacle. You're the chair of a board in a big company. Can you tell us how you made that transition? So the last we heard, you're working at a brokerage firm. What happened after that?
Sure. As I said, it was almost 25 years, and I thought, well, maybe it's time for another change. And at the time, the gold price actually was the outlook for the gold price was a little bleak. And as it turned out, there was another 7 years of downturn. So I actually chose that time to make a change. But leading up to it, again, tapping into my network of people that I knew, I was friendly with certain mining executives, and we had good conversations. And so I was invited to join boards, and starting with some small ones, some junior producers, and then worked my way up to larger ones. And it really was the people. If I didn't trust the people that I was going to be working with, I would not have joined those boards. So it was paramount that we knew each other, we knew our values, we knew what was important, priorities, and we were like-minded.
And can you talk about what you do as a board member? Again, some people coming into the industry might not really know what the role of a director is, or even the chair. So can you just describe that a bit?
Sure, by all means. So I have served on 7 boards, and the largest of which is Cameco, which I'm now chair. I think the most important thing to know is for publicly traded companies, they have shareholders that elect the board of directors to act on their behalf. So shareholders can't attend all of the management meetings, the board meetings, etc. So they entrust the board of directors to oversee the activities of management. So management is running the company day to day. They propose strategies, they propose budgets, and it's up to the board of directors collectively to oversee the day-to-day, what's happening, receive that information on a regular basis. We meet at least 4 times a year. And we do split off into committees. So the board itself has an audit committee, for example, to deal with audit and finance matters. We have a technical committee to deal with operational issues, etc. Issues, operations, oversight. And so it is, we speak for the shareholders, and we also interact with the management to make sure that management and the board are aligned with the future of the company. And that's the most important thing. Is it's not about one person, it's about where the company is going as a corporation for the future.
Yes, and all of your background has helped you to do that job well, because you worked, as you know, going way back in the field. You would have done the work of a geologist. You then came up through understanding capital markets, working in the brokerage side of the business, and then you've worked on several boards, different size companies, and you bring all that wealth of experience and insight with you to this role that you currently have. So congrats on that. Can you tell us what you think is next for you, or what are your plans from here on?
That's a good question. Cameco is now about a $35 billion value. And with the acquisition of Westinghouse, it is a 100-year-old firm in the US that is involved in the fuel cycle in terms of parts, servicing, and of course, Cameco supplies fuel to the reactors in the nuclear industry. And it's on a global basis. Westinghouse is spread out in over 20 different countries, has 10,000 employees. And for Cameco to have that base and that understanding and the integral position that it plays in the global uranium industry, it's a very good match. So moving forward, I think we're just getting started with Cameco. So there's an awful lot to come. Yeah. And of course, the move to clean energy is paramount right now with climate change.
Yes, good tailwinds on the sector. So a good time to be in uranium, and exciting developments. Well, I would like to thank you for sharing all of this with us. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
In terms of, as I mentioned, making choices for your career, for your job, your roles, over the course of many years, I think it's very important to try and keep as many options open as possible. Get familiar with saying yes instead of giving all the reasons why not. Practice saying yes, and who knows what opportunities may arise.
Yeah, no, it's an industry that certainly has a lot to offer if you're willing to be open-minded, and as you say, don't close the doors, open them up and see what happens. Very fulfilling, and certainly never a dull day. Even through the ups and downs. Well, thank you very much, Catherine. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, and we do wish you well.
Thank you very much, Jackie.